All right, so let's talk about our prisoner's dilemma. So, at the simple level, what is the solution to the prisoner's dilemma?
Yeah, and we're going to break this down a little bit further, but I think at the simplest level, in order to break through a prisoner's dilemma, there has to be actual trust, because there's no way that you're going to be able to have the parties go into the kind of blind submission of, are they going to backstab or are they going to cooperate, and have everybody choose cooperate, in which case we get the full benefit of the situation, unless there's some level of trust.
Right. And we see over and over again in this movie that we haven't established that. It's been broken in a lot of different ways, both between between the main characters and between all of the ancillary parties. Like you said, this is sort of a multi-sided problem. So let's talk about, what's our mountaintop scene for this movie? What is the scene that best exemplifies this sort of prisoner's dilemma, insoluble standoff, lack of trust? Where does that come to a head in the Mission Impossible?
So one of the reasons I think I thought to pick this movie to start off our game theory series was because of this specific scene. And while this is not necessarily going to be using the same model of the prisoner's dilemma, there are elements of it built in. It's another model, as many of these game theory models are, that it is revolving around trust between the parties. So let's talk about the moment, and then we'll talk about the model. So the moment that I'm thinking of here is when they all get to Venice and they show up to this club. It's insinuated, I think, that the White Widow character owns or operates this club, or this is her hangout or something like that. And so you get these different parties all coming in. You get our heroes, the IMF team. You get the White Widow, of course. You have Gabriel, who represents the entity. And then finally you have the United States military political guys, right, who are also showing up late. And I love it. White Widow kind of lays out the situation. She's like, look, so the MacGuffin, the key that we have in this situation, here's my problem. I'm trying to sell this to other people, but she has her half of the key or whatever. She's like, if I sell this to any of the parties, then that party is going to be eternally grateful to me. But every other party is going to try to kill me immediately for what I have just done. I will not be safe. And it's basically the crux of the second half of the movie here, is okay, well, if we do one thing with the key, then what are all of the secondary, tertiary effects that are going to happen as a result of moving the key from person A to person B? And you kind of have this bouncing around of the key, and then you see the effects as they bounce the key.
Right. And I can't trust anybody to behave on my behalf, to act on my behalf. I can't trust anybody to take care of me, but I also need to be on the winning side, right? I also need to pick the right person that's going to win, so that the other people will all be crushed, so that I will not be murdered as a result, right? So being a bit player in this scene, even a relatively powerful one, is kind of a terrible situation to be in. And so we kind of see this, there. We can see everyone is acting almost entirely out of fear, with two exceptions. We have the Gabriel character, who is apparently allied with this mysterious entity, who doesn't appear to be acting out of fear. He's acting some combination of malice and having nothing to lose, right? So he's a great archetypal bad guy, because there's no levers to play on him. He doesn't want anything other than to win, right? He's a completely amoral character. And then contrasted to that is our hero Ethan and his team. Ethan is the only person in the room that has people that he actually likes around him, and people that he actually trusts, to your point. And the thing that I love about it is that everybody else in the scene is viewing that as a weakness, right? Their lens on how you approach the situation is, oh, you've got two people who you care about, and you can't protect both of them, and so therefore you're going to lose. They don't view it as wow, you've got a team and I'm here by myself. They view it as, well, you've got weaknesses because I've got ways to hurt you. And that is illustrative, right? That's the situation you find yourself in, is, if you don't want to trust people because you don't want to be exposed to being double-crossed or to losing something you like, or if you're viewing other people's attachments as just levers to get them to move in the direction you want. That's what these situations do to us. That's what fear does to us.
Yeah, and so the model that we're going to map this to in game theory, and again, it's not a perfect mapping, but we're trying to, as we start off this series, and hopefully if you continue to listen, you'll see how we do it throughout the different episodes that we go through in movies. But when you're talking game theory, it's never a perfect example, right? That's not what a model is. A model is not, oh, this is my situation exactly, and so I can just figure out how to make a decision. It's just a way to look at the situation so that I can understand the potential outcomes and have a more educated approach to the decision that I'm going to make. So the model that we want to look at here is called the Mexican Standoff. So in a Mexican standoff in game theory, you have 3 or more parties who are all basically have weapons pointed at each other at the same time. Classic Western movie scenario that you might find yourself in. And the thing is, somebody has to shoot first. If you shoot first, there is a small advantage in shooting first, right? Because you have a slightly faster reaction time. But the problem is that if you shoot first, then you are immediately going to be the ire of everybody else in that situation.
And everybody's going to start shooting, right? Nobody's shooting until somebody shoots first. And so you're alive for the moment, right? Do you take your advantage or do you try to live in this uncomfortable stasis?
Yeah, it's a classic Cold War situation, right? Like we are in a nuclear war and you're sitting there. It's like if anybody presses the button, then they're immediately going to get blown to kingdom come.
Right. Everybody else will turn on them or something. Yeah.
Exactly. So the Mexican standoff is, I think, really appropriate here because it's another trust-based model where it's like, how do you navigate that situation? It seems like there's no winning. And basically that's what White Widow is proposing at this point is like, really, how do I win? Because sure, I can get the $100 million from selling the key, which will give me enough money to run away for a time. But do I really think that I'm going to escape all of the enemies that I'm going to create? And as any anti-hero / villain does, she's lumping everybody else in with her, right? Assuming everybody else has the same ulterior motives, the same selfish motives. She's like, yeah, and so for you as well. If you do anything, then everybody's also going to turn on you.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, you see the world as you see yourself. Like this is a classic thing. And if you see the world as if everybody's going to try to murder each other, you might be pragmatic or you might be, switching to the dark side.
Yeah.
One of the two.
So now getting back, Brian, to what you were saying, how do we navigate this? Because in the traditional Mexican standoff, you might just have the simplest version of the model with 3 people all pointing guns at each other. But in this situation, what Ethan's recognizing is it's not that simple of a situation. And what the other party is trying to tell him is like, no, I have guns pointed at a hostage and you have to do what I want you to do. And what he's saying is what you don't realize is that what you're calling a liability, I'm calling a team.
Right. And the answer, as it so often is in these movies, go back to our Fast and Furious things or our trusty band of rebels in Star Wars or whatever, right? The answer is that having people around you that you do actually trust allows you to force multiply, allows you to be in more than one place at a time, allows you to have multiple skill sets that you can leverage, have a diversity of thought, but also just gives you independent actors that it's not your job to tell them what to do. It's not your job to control them. Nobody else in this movie has friends. Nobody else in this movie has allies. A couple of them have loyal subordinates, but that's about it. So the Ethan's team, as it's portrayed here, is the only one that we'll talk a lot more about this in the next episode, but they're the only ones that are empowered to act independently and trusting each other to have the same end goal, where everyone else is pretty much out for themselves or some subset thereof.
Yeah. And so when you find yourself in a Mexican standoff, many different scenarios, the model is helpful to understand what options you might have at your disposal. What I'm normally looking to do in order to diffuse the situation is to figure out what is the unorthodox way to approach this? What is the way in which, like you said, Brian, we can build trust with people, or I can leverage trust from somebody in the situation that maybe it isn't assumed that there is trust.
How do you flip the script on I assume everybody's going to betray me, right? And when you frame that question that way, it's not that complicated of a question. Like, how do you flip the script on I assume everybody is going to betray me is somebody has to be the first one to not act that way. Somebody has to be the first one to demonstrate trust. Somebody has to be the first one to demonstrate forgiveness. Somebody has to be the first one to demonstrate forbearance, right? It's obvious and nobody wants to do it because it feels like weakness. It feels like losing. It feels like missing an opportunity to win. It feels like everybody else is going to gang up on me. But if you could put yourself in a position to demonstrate that and start to build alliances, start to build coalitions, start to sort of turn down the temperature of how these interactions are going to go, then you absolutely do have the potential to diffuse the standoff.